Welcome everybody to the November 17th meeting of the Norton Planning Board. Somehow we have been doing remote participation for 8 months now. So just to summarize once again, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and strict imposing limitations on the number of people that can gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Norton Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. To join this meeting, you can participate in the following ways: by using the Zoom link that is listed on the agenda for this meeting. If you are in the Zoom app, the meeting ID is 638-929-1060. There is also a phone dial-in number to dial in remotely. You can also view the meeting on Norton Cable Access or the next day on the Norton Media Center's YouTube page. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In addition, please feel free to email questions to the board ahead of the meeting or during the meeting to Paul DiGiuseppe, the town planner. His email address is listed on the town's website. Additionally, meeting materials are posted online on the Norton Planning Board's webpage. So, with that out of the way, welcome everybody to the meeting. First item on the agenda, any business and policies. We don't have any bills and warrants. We do have some minutes in the folder. So has everybody had a chance to review those minutes? And does anybody have any questions? There are 2 sets.
Minutes in the folder. Excuse me, I didn't see minutes in the folder.
There are minutes from the October 6th meeting and the October 27th meeting.
So I think the October 6th, I think we're just looking to see who made a motion since I wasn't at that meeting. So I think everything else was fine on those meeting minutes except for I think where it stated I had made a motion.
When you were not participating, yeah.
Right, exactly, Tim. Wish I had, but I didn't.
But yeah, so that is, that one is there. And it is, no longer includes you as making a motion. So we are, if people feel they've reviewed those enough at the last meeting, we can move forward on those.
Motion to approve the October 6th minutes.
Thank you, Steve, for the motion.
Scott will second.
Thank you, Scott, for the second. Does anybody have any further discussion about the October 6th meeting minutes? Hearing none, I will go to the vote. Oren?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Julie?
I'll recuse myself.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So again, that was a motion by Steve, a second by Scott, and the roll call down the line with everybody, but Julie was abstaining for October 6th minutes. We have the October 27th minutes. Have people had a chance to review those? Oren, you mentioned that you hadn't really had an opportunity to review those.
I just spotted them quickly. I'm sorry. Yeah, there was not much on them. I have no problem with those.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to discuss in relation to this set of minutes?
Motion to approve the set of minutes.
Thank you, Julie, for the motion.
Will second.
Thank you, Scott, for the second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Oren?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Both sets of minutes are completed. The next item on the agenda would be future meeting dates, but since we do have the consultants working on the master plan update for the town here, I think we can jump ahead to that, take that a little bit out of order and get them go through this, and then we can take care of setting future meeting dates after that presentation is completed. Since we only have them scheduled through December, so we need to schedule a bit further out. So, Paul, I'm not sure if we have know who's going to lead, or if anybody's looking to share their screen on the SERPED side. But
yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Grant King from SERPED. I'd share my screen if that's possible.
It is.
Sure.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Let me try and do that right now. Hopefully you can see a slide that says Norton Master Plan Midpoint Summary.
Yes, we can.
All right, excellent. So thank you, Tim, and thank you to other members of the board for the invitation to meet with you guys tonight. And thanks to Paul for serving as the point of contact and the conduit between SERPED and the board to date. My name is Grant King. I'm the Director of Comprehensive Planning and Housing at SERPED. I'm here with my colleague, Lizeth Gonzalez, who is a Senior Comprehensive Planner and one of your project co-leads on the master plan. For those of you, really briefly, who aren't familiar with SERPED, we're the regional planning agency in southeastern Massachusetts. We serve 27 cities and towns. We are also your economic development district for that region and your metropolitan planning organization, doing your EDD. Those acronyms basically just mean that we work with federal and state governments and local partners such as yourselves to develop and implement infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, sewers, water lines, and to conduct planning such as your master plan. Basically tonight we're here to answer any specific questions you may have about the project to date, and we'd like to take a brief tour of this summary, this midpoint executive summary document that we provided to you last week. Midpoint isn't exactly right, that's what we called it, but if we were in a football game, we'd be well into the third quarter, or if we were at a Bruins game, we'd be starting the third period. We're a good bit into the plan, but there's quite a bit left to do. So with your permission, let's structure this tour around kind of the following questions. Where have we been in this process, and where are we going? What are the next steps to get there? What are the main themes we've heard so far, and what are some of the specific items that may or may not make it into your plan, but are trending towards making it into your plan? And then what topics might require a little more exploration as we finalize the work over the next 7 months. So, and then finally, Lizeth will walk you through some of the more detailed results from your most recent workshop. Does that sound good, everybody? All right, great. So that's what this first slide really tries to set the table for, is where have we been, where are we going? Simply a reminder that the project started just over a year ago. We've had 3 workshops. The first was kind of a discovery visioning workshop. The second was a specialized workshop that focused on land use, housing, and economic development. For the results from both of those workshops, I'll post them into the chat so you can go and consult them if you haven't already done so at the project webpage. And then we've had this recent workshop that focused on open space and recreation and natural and cultural resources. Just hoping to remind you that really all of this content comes from you. We're serving as your advisors and your secretaries and your ghost writers and your graphics creators and mappers for this project. All of the key ideas come from the community, your existing planning, and interviews from with elected and appointed officials such as yourselves. The other thing we're trying to make sure is coming across is, we're not done yet. There will be at least one more public event, and then final open house to review the document itself. I'll get into some of those details on the next slide. And then, we wanted to acknowledge with this last point that I take responsibility for the fact that COVID-19 really did disrupt the way we're approaching this project, and it did impose some delays. There's nothing really we could do about that as we kind of got our footing and realized that we needed to hold workshops online and get create ways for the public to give us their valuable input remotely. That said, we want to take responsibility for that and acknowledge that we do need to kind of redouble our efforts to rebuild the momentum and make sure that the plan, the deliverable certainly won't suffer. We're just hoping that the plan has that key momentum, that consensus, the excitement and optimism that master plans really do try to create, and leave you with a plan that everyone believes in and will be easy to implement.
Thank you.
So, next steps. As I said, we'll have one more specialized workshop that will take place in, let's say, late winter, early spring of this year, of next year, of 2021. And we'll make that announcement via the Norton Media Center, the town webpage, the Facebook page, which has well over 200 followers. We'll make those details available as soon as we have them. Then, as soon as we wrap up that last key public input process, we'll start drafting the plan, and we'll deliver draft chapters to you, probably in batches of 2 or 3 chapters at a time, starting in the early spring, asking for you and Paul and others to comment and give us, I should say, edits on that draft. Then, once we have a pretty solid understanding of the text of the plan, we'll put it in a graphically polished, fully consultant-grade layout. And then there will be one final public comment period and at least one open house style event where we, hopefully in person at that point, but if we have to, online, we'll gather public comment on the final draft of the plan. But that's a few steps away. When Lizette starts talking, I'll be sure to post some of these links in the chat. But I hope you have seen other master plans, not just your prior master plan from, I believe, 1998. Particularly other master plans that Serpent has created, and they kind of follow this pattern. We identify key goals in each of the master plan elements. We identify several strategies to make those goals real. I'll give you some specific examples in a moment. And then for each of those strategies, we really try and talk about who is the responsible party. Is it the planning board? Is it the finance committee? Is it the COMCOM? Is it a combination of those? Is it another body? And then we try and measure success and progress by giving you clear performance measures, benchmarks to note progress, and ideally good progress towards that strategy to implement the goal. And then we kind of show you where to look for advice, example success stories and potential partnerships that you might need to make those strategies real. And then we highlight, I hope you'll see, that many of the actions that we identify in the master plan will complement each other and kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And we'll identify those complementary actions for each of these strategies. And we hope that in that way, we found from our, this is probably the 7th or 8th master plan that we've written alongside other communities, Marion, Lakeville, Carver, Mattapoisett ongoing, Attleboro ongoing. A lot of your neighbors and nearby communities, this has been a successful formula to make sure that the plan is easy to use and easy to understand. So, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about some of the key themes that we've already identified in your plan. And this all, again, comes from the public process, from the existing planning document. I have a cheat sheet for you. I kind of hesitate here. I'm hoping that you guys have spent some time with this over the weekend or late last week. I don't want this to come across as this is already decided upon or as a final text and that all of this will make it into the plan. That's not the case necessarily. This is still a draft that's ongoing. But that said, let's talk about some of those key themes and some of the specific actions and activities that you will likely pursue as a community over the next 5 to 10 years, the life of this master plan, to to achieve those goals. So we've heard pretty clearly that the town would like to complete key transportation projects that improve circulation, safety, and appearance in town. Those are pretty straightforward. We understand the Village Green and that Village Center study, the bike path, your complete streets high priority projects, some of those safety and access issues that are being identified as we speak in those sticker map activities that are they were in person in March, they were live during the last activity, and they will be live over 2 weeks again for our next workshop. These are key, programs and investments and coordinated activities that will likely help you achieve this goal. And in the case of, for example, the Village Core, the Village Center Core, I should say, this is a complementary thing in order to achieve some of that placemaking and how does the puts it as a walkable, vibrant community. You're going to need to make some infrastructure investments as well, and then that way your land use goals and your transportation goals really complement each other. We also heard very clearly from the community that we want to continue to support your strong tradition of environmental-based planning, open space and recreation planning and conservation. And whether that's, you have an extremely detailed open space and recreation plan, picking out those key locations and priorities for property acquisitions and further investments in open space. Whether it's newer planning, such as municipal vulnerability preparedness planning, or a program that you haven't taken part in yet, green communities. I know there's been some interest in it. Those are key ways to continue to build on this very successful history of open space and recreation planning in town. We've also heard that, every investment in town needs to be funded, so we need to expand our tax base, particularly our commercial tax base, at key locations in town. And those are kind of those areas with an existing critical mass of industrial or commercial development, or underutilized properties, interchanges, those key sites that you as a town have identified and that the public has identified for programs such as Chapter 43D, expedited permitting, for further grant and infrastructure applications, for revisiting your zoning, or highlighting in a marketing and permitting guide. So these are sort of those multi-pronged attacks to encourage economic development where you would like it to be.
Brand, before I get too much further,
Sure.
Obviously as the board kind of looks through this, I'm not sure if this is later in your presentation, but are there any points now that you would like us to give feedback on, and how would you like that to be submitted? And if that's part of your later kind of clip wrap up, then that's fine.
No, so we the main way that you will influence the project is to continue to correspond with us through Paul. And then when we provide you those draft master plan chapters or elements in the spring, that you use your red marker and edit them and make sure that there's nothing in the plan that you don't want to be in the plan, and that there's nothing missing that you do want included in the plan. I recognize some of your faces from participating in these workshops, although not all of you. So that's another key opportunity for you to influence the plan, is to attend these workshops, submit your comments there, and that's really what we need from you. This is just kind of, Paul let us know that you wanted an update from us as to where things stand, and that's what I'm working through now. So if that's not, I can certainly stop.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to hit that before I forgot.
Yeah, sure. No, so that's an excellent question. Then you will be our editors for the master plan as we give you draft chapters in batches to review, probably 2 weeks at a time in the spring. All right, excellent. Yeah, so I'm almost done, and then you'll hear from Lizette about some of the detailed workshop 3 results. Let's see here. So, we've heard that zoning would like some attention paid to zoning, although the existing zoning bylaw is good. So we want to build on those existing features, improve on ease of use, and try and think of ways to complement newer strategies. So, for example, design guidelines for the village center core, or more kind of nuts and bolts improvements to your zoning bylaw. And that would require working sessions with Paul that we'll probably do as we draft the plan. We've also heard more housing, so we've heard densities that allow affordable downsizing for seniors and other smaller households. And housing is another one of those difficult nuts to crack, like economic development, but that really requires a diversity of strategies. There's no one single bullet. But some of them are pretty clear. You could develop a specialized housing production plan to get a little more control over those 40B projects in town, along with zoning board rules and regulations for those 40B projects. Consider participating in the Housing Choice Initiative program, revisiting and incentivizing your existing cluster bylaw to produce smaller, affordable units, both subsidized units, capital A, affordable, and just units that are affordable at an affordable price point. Another thing we hear a lot about in the public participation is, you have a beautiful liberal arts college in the middle of your community. That's something many towns would kill for. So how do we explore kind of the best practices that other communities in New England have pursued, formalize and strengthen that relationship, and we'll try to explore that in more detail with the plan. And then finally, we hear that some investments might be necessary, and I know you have an ongoing conversation about the town hall and senior center location. We've heard that the town needs to complete a Americans with Disabilities Act self-assessment and transition planning. We've heard, desire for investments in water and sewer infrastructure, again, complementary actions for economic development. So this is sort of like the broad thrust of the planning so far, and some of the specifics that will likely make its way into your plan in terms of state, federal, and local programmatic and policy changes. Finally, my last slide, and then briefly from Lizette. Some things you may want to explore, and this, Tim, this might be kind of tangentially related to your question. What might you want to consider as we wrap up this work over the next couple of months? I think items 1 and 3 are kind of no-brainers. How can we get more and more site-specific, community-driven input about the plan using that map where people literally place stickers on a map and put a comment there? Those have been invaluable. So how can we continue to get more and more insight into the community and Norton's priorities through that exercise? And then can we sort of work with you and with Paul to create a body from not just the planning board, the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, the CONCOM, other bodies in town, at-large members, to really take this plan once it's done and implement it. I think this is a no-brainer that many communities have pursued to make sure that their plan doesn't just sit on a shelf, that it actually makes or achieves the goals of the town. And then 2 and 4 are kind of depending on your appetite and on potential funding programs that might be available. Do you want to consider some more detailed analysis? Some communities want to shy away from this, others do. They want to do an updated build-out and a suitability analysis that might help you make some of those growth and conservation choices. Do you want to add, we're hearing a lot about municipal vulnerability preparedness, and there's a document to draw from. Do you want to add a specialized element that could really address those and talk about how it can complement some of those other strategies in the master plan? I leave this up to you. That's something for you to chew on as a board and with Paul and pending grant funding. Those are sort of some things that you should consider as we move to first extend the local contract and then maybe apply for other grant funding through SERPED that has funded about half of this plan. So let me pause there. That's kind of the summary of the big picture. I know that took a little while. I just want to make sure we gave you the content you were looking for. Do you have any questions about the general thrust of the plan before we pass it to Lizette for a quick rundown of the last workshop?
I do not, but I'll let any of the members of the board chime in that are on the line here if they have anything that they'd like to discuss, or whether they'd like to have Lizette go forward.
I have a question, Tim, and it's a general one. In looking through some of this material, at what point is there a trade-off of what we look at as to the wish list of what we'd like, as to the realities of what's available, A, or what fundable, B, and how do we do we throw everything out there and saying, well, we'd love to do this and put the funding number on it, or do we discount that and try to get into a more realistic approach of what's in the realm of possibilities, what's likely, what's not likely?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll tell you this. One of the chapters of the plan is an implementation chapter that sort of summarizes all of the who's responsible, how will we measure performance, what will this cost, what's the appropriate timeline. And in some plans, again, depending on you're our boss on this. Some plans identify high priority, medium priority, low priority, or near-term, long-term investments. Some try to do a back-of-the-envelope benefit cost analysis on some of the projects, although that's a pretty specialized task, particularly, for example, for a zoning change. That would require another specialized plan. But we could certainly talk about price tags for the bike path, for example, where that stands, or we could provide a level of hierarchy to some of these recommendations that make them high priority, low cost, or sort of wish list. I think that's the thrust of your question. How much of this is wishful thinking, and how much of it is something we can do? The last thought I would share, I hope that answered your question. The last thought I would share is any of the master plans I mentioned before, I can draw a direct line between an idea that came up at a workshop, strategy for a master plan, and in some cases millions of dollars of infrastructure investments and projects that came directly from those master plans. So keep in mind that sometimes the funding isn't there, but the master plan goes and gets it.
Thank you.
And if I can just add to that, again, Oren, that's a really a crucial question, and this is where an implementation committee, or we still have to work through this, but when we did this in the city of Austin, we actually had 8 implementation teams. So those teams would look at the different responsibilities they were charged with, but they could also make recommendations on the capital projects where the investments are. So you could have a team that's looking at transportation that could make specific recommendations to FinCom and the select board, but based on what's in the plan, and they themselves could help determine the prioritization of those projects. But this will be helpful because this helps them, this will provide them with necessary information to help them make those decisions.
Did that answer your question?
No, I don't know if there's an answer. I think but that's the process, and I think I understand that.
There's multiple options, Warren. That's the benefit of it. But the key is we want to identify what those key priorities or projects are.
And clearly identify that they came from the community, so they should, in theory, already come from a place of consensus and have that sort of political backing. Making a clear case at town meeting, for example. This came from you. This came from the master plan. Any other questions before we kind of wrap up with a brief summary of what happened on September 30th in person and then over 2 weeks following September 30th online? All right, I'm going to pass it to Lizette.
Thanks, Grant. So Grant did a great overview of the big picture, looking at what we're doing, where we're going, and this is a bit of a closer look at how our workshops have been going, and especially during COVID, it's really nice to see that people are participating, people are coming out to see what's going on with the plan. So at the end of September, we hosted a virtual workshop that took place over the course of 2 weeks. And through that time, we invited people to visit the workshop page, take a look at the data and information that we had, but also participate in the activities that we created purposefully for this workshop. On September 30th, that was our live Zoom meeting, and we had 20 residents attend, and after a brief discussion and presentation, we had a really great conversation about the wants, needs, and desires for Norton, what the vision is in regards to these two topics and elements of the master plan. The mapping exercise is really complementary to that discussion. This is a breakdown of what people have been saying and how their comments are kind of breaking down in themes. So the most popular were sidewalks, bike lanes, as well as parks. And so with those, it often falls into the categories of, I like to see more sidewalks here, or I'd like to see more bike lanes here, or I'd like to see improvements to what's already there. And with parks, sometimes it's the same nature of I'd like to see more or maintenance, but there's also maybe pockets of places where people are like, you know what, at this specific location in Norton, I think we could see a park sometime in the future. And that's the nature of the comments that we're getting. You'll notice that there's a sticker that people can create their own, and it overlaps with many of the other categories. But again, it falls into this idea of where you'd like to see sidewalks, bike lanes, as well as different parks or proposing events at certain sites in town. This exercise so far has received 76 comments, and they've really helped shape a lot of the main themes that we've been working on, and kind of narrowing down the specifics of what the big picture might look like and how we can start to get there. So I think we can move over to the next slide. Thank you. And the second exercise that we invited people to participate in was a cultural inventory. This was a fun exercise to make, actually, because we got to take images from town and present them to people based on these 6 categories that you see here. Historic buildings, open space districts, and have them choose which ones they really identified as what makes Norton Norton. And I'd like to highlight the results from the historic buildings and open spaces, because those, if people could have chosen all of them as their favorite, I think they would have. They received so many responses, but we could only put 3 on this page here. But that really just tells us that Norton residents really value their historical buildings and their open spaces. So we heard a lot about, I should say, this complements the results from the sticker exercise, where people were saying, we want to see more preservation, keep our woods and keep them beautiful, those types of things. And I want to also highlight that there are a couple links in the summary where you can actually see the detailed responses to both the survey and the wiki map. So you can take a look at there and see those responses in detail. And this really summarizes what happened at the virtual workshop, not only during the workshop itself, but those 2 weeks that people had to, on their own time, to come in and interact with the information that we give them. And as a part of that, we constantly try to make ourselves available to them. We have the comment card, we have multiple ways in which they can contact us to either submit comments or ask questions, really. And we've tried to make the interactive part of our virtual participation here as easy to understand as possible. You know, we put out videos so that way people who aren't so familiar with the materials and how to use the technology, that way they're comfortable and they have examples to see before they really dive into it. So if you guys have any questions about how this workshop went or how we're handling participation during COVID, feel free to ask away, but I do encourage you to take a look at the detailed information from the surveys. It's really interesting.
Right. So that sort of concludes it from us. Thank you for your time and patience with our update. We're happy to answer any other questions. We're always available either directly through our SERPED contacts or through Paul. So thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Paul, while I see the links that Grant has thrown up in the chat, will we be able to download those and just put them in the master plan documents folder in the Dropbox so that they're all available after the meeting and we don't go chasing where does that link that Grant put in the chat of which Zoom meeting that we did?
Some of the interactive mapping, the results from the second workshop wouldn't be available offline. So when in doubt, go to the project webpage. You will find it either in the interactive maps or in the document library.
Sure, yeah. But in any case, the URL can be linked or however we want to do that. But just a one-stop shop, so we don't have to
For sure.
dive around. Following kind of, thank you for your overview, Lizeth. Any members of the board have anything they wanted to ask at this point?
David, if you don't mind, I have just a question. I was on the September 30th call, and I believe I wasn't on the whole thing, but there was some reference to this water access point plan. Is that something that the town has generated? Is that something SERPED is generating?
Yeah, that's a good question. It comes, an application went through the Taunton River Stewardship Council, where SERPED is a kind of a voting member to fund that project from your conservation agent, Jen Carlino. My understanding is that was successful, and for about, I don't remember the exact number. Then Jen worked with SERPED to write up a scope of work. I believe there was a very small amount of town meeting funds also allocated at the most recent town meeting to that. So it's I want to say like a $15,000 or $20,000 project, much of it grant funded, that is in the works right now to catalog and do deep research on, fly drones over, take photos of, create a signage portfolio for all of the potential and current and existing water access points in town. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, but there's a follow-up to it. It's my own problem, but I spent afternoons trying to find access to the reservoir, to the reservoir, and it's a challenge. And the other question I had was whether or not there's the follow-up to that in terms of information that in our review, what we're looking at what point do you want us to give you some input before you start drafting something? Is that done in a kind of assessment way where if there's something we're looking at what you're doing and we'd like to see a focus on that, or we'd like to see it develop further to alert you of it? Is it on an individual basis, or does the board take that up in advance of you starting to generate some of these programs?
Any and all of the above work for me. You can contact us directly. You can send comments through Paul. You can comment through the multiple ways on the project webpage. You can participate in the next workshop and say, hey, I wasn't at the land use workshop, but I want to say this. Just because it's focusing on transportation and services and facilities doesn't mean you don't want to hear other ideas at the workshop. It's really choose your adventure. Let us know in any way you want how you think we should edit or add ideas to this the swirling mass of ideas that we're going to try and catalog and put in a nice plan for you. I would really encourage you to read the Lakeville master plan to get a sense of where this is all going. I put that link in the chat.
Okay, the other question was, in the Norton Master Plan 2020 that you have on your website, under the current land uses, you identify, I mean, there's an inordinate amount of institutional uses and then town uses. Is there a way of going through this as to the property the town owns that's well? We see what's owned by the town, but what's in use now, the classifying, what kind, is that conservation land, is it open land, is it land we can look at to develop?
Excellent question. I will have to go back and remember whether we did this for your plan or whether this is something we've done on another plan. But on that interactive map, I hope you're looking at the interactive version of it. We have typically provided a breakdown of what all of those institutional properties are. And I think we've done it for Norton because I remember seeing, for example, Wheaton College in the middle.
Yeah, you did.
A bright purple, and your conservation commission as an owner, churches, and all those tax exempt properties that are what we call institutional on that map. We kind of do break that down for two reasons. One, just to have good data available, but also when we're making decisions about open space acquisitions, for example, or that sort of very finite and difficult to find excess public land that might have economic development potential, we need to know a little bit more what that means and who the ownership is, and if there are any potential networking, filling in a hole in a donut, adding to it an open space network, that kind of thing. So those are the two reasons we do that. I think we did it for your town, Lauren, but I didn't look at that before I got on this call.
You did one for institutional uses, and it did show the Norton uses, but then it shows unbuilt parcels. And the question I have is, what of the town-owned property is available for development? Is unused or is available? Is there a building on it?
Okay, so that's a separate question from your first question. So your question has evolved into what town-owned property has remaining development potential?
Yeah.
Okay. That is something I do not know offhand, but returning back to my presentation, I think it was items 2 and 4. I said we're depending on your appetite or interest in funding. A quick build-out analysis would easily identify what town-owned, not just town-owned, but what properties still have remaining development potential under existing by right zoning. So we could do that for you. It's just, again, whether that's something that has a critical mass of support and you really want to influence the plan as a board, or whether that's much like a fiscal impact analysis for a zoning change, whether that's maybe more of a specialized exercise for informing decisions after the plan is made.
Thank you.
Okay. We took almost an hour of your time. I did not intend for that to happen. I hope you're not bored. We'll get out.
Not at all.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grant and Lizette.
Bye. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that gives everybody a good summary where we are. I think that if we have any comments individually that we want, I think let's not be sending them through Paul and onto the Serped team. Because even though the next workshop is coming, we all know that COVID time works differently than regular time. So, Paul, is there anything else that you wanted to add from your perspective, kind of in terms of the process and everything else, or?
Well, I just want to let you know I did upload the Lakeville Master Plan and the Discovery Workshop PDFs to it, and I'll resubmit the links to the project website. I just want to emphasize what I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, which is this plan has to be an action-oriented plan to help implement the vision. You know, the public sets the vision of the priorities that they want to achieve, but we need to lay out a good strategy for different teams to help make the plan a reality. You know, I would view this as a success when the plan is actually being implemented. If we can look 5 years from now and say we did all these things to implement the plan. Too many plans don't have that next step of getting people to the implementation, and a lot of good plans have died on the vine. So they're not good plans because they weren't executed. So I'm gonna keep pushing that, and you know, whether it's the planning board has, obviously you have an important role with the development of this plan, but so some of the things, you know, one of the things that should come out of this plan is revising the zoning bylaw. Where I'm going to disagree with Grant is I think we have a terrible bylaw, and it needs to be significantly overhauled. But we have to see what comes out of the plan. Some of the public has talked about that, but you deal with it all the time. I deal with it. It's got a lot of problems, and so that's one of the things that comes out of the plan is revising your bylaws, your zoning bylaws, to align with wherever the goals of the master plan is going, as well as also how we invest in capital infrastructure. So anyway, I'll keep beating the drum on that one. But anyway.
Okay.
Paul, this is Julie. I have to wholeheartedly agree with you. I mean, the plan can look great up front, but if the implementation chapter is not finely tuned, has really good implementable strategies and a timeline across those, because this really should, in my opinion, set up our agenda for the town meetings coming forward.
Yeah.
You know, we've in the past obviously, you know, worked with you and said, okay, what do we want to take on? Like, this is really our chance to grow that into really a plan that we could set forth saying, okay, if this is our vision for the community, we can then set forth a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Very easily using the master plan if it's done correctly. So I just want to say that I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you. You and I have worked in a similar field and collaborators and other ends and not come to full fruition. And this really our time as a board, as municipality, impacts that really should lead to an implementable plan that is clearly laid out for the future. So I just want to say wholeheartedly agree with you.
And thank you. And again, this is going to be an important role that you have as the draft goes forward, is to help us make sure that it helps make our reality possible. So it's an exciting thing. I mean, you should be really excited when this plan comes forward, because you're going to have an impact on something that could change the way the town, you know, handles planning and development for a decade or more.
Well, and also grant opportunities. I mean, that's the really other key thing, is that the way the master plan is written and set up is going to really have a huge impact on what type of grant opportunities the municipality can go for in the future. So I really want to make sure, Paul, and maybe I probably should have said this, but Grant was still on the line, that is a huge part of what comes forth, you know, in whatever shape or form, you know, you and the team want to see that in. But, you know, as a municipality that you know, can struggle financially in certain ways, shapes, or forms, and also as our representative on the Capital Improvements Committee, you know, really looking at those grant opportunities that can be taken advantage of with a smartly written, crafted master plan is also, I think, a huge opportunity for us to take advantage of.
I absolutely support that. And Julie, that's so right, because we've been spending the last my 2.5 years, I've written a number of grants, and we have to reference a 1998 plan, and it's be so much more effective if we have a much more up-to-date and spot-on plan that we could say, like if we're looking at applying for funds, over on at the village center, that the plan talks about, that we have a master plan that talks about the village center, or Reed and Barton, or wherever else. There are other areas of town that the public has said we want to see improvements on. That only adds, that builds points in the with grant applications.
Tim,
Okay.
I have a question. Is it worthwhile, rather than us each submitting areas that we'd like to see addressed, would it make some sense, and obviously we may want to eventually hone this down to a committee, but in general, getting just everybody on the board, maybe a working session of certain areas, and having everybody throw out ideas that they're concerned about, so we can hear within ourselves, what parts of everybody else's concerns are, and try to mold them a little bit more in a simplified way to Serpent, as opposed to desperate different people giving different ideas. Just running them through us, because I think we all may have ideas that we've looked at or concerns, and just melding it through the board so it doesn't come back to us as a surprise, and giving them some real feedback from where we stand as a board, without being definitive. Just these are ideas we'd like to have them explore, as opposed to waiting for them to generate something and then have it to change, then look at it. I think there's enough information, or maybe we have enough concerns, that just talking about it for a little bit amongst ourselves, we may be able to come with ideas we'd like them to focus on.
Okay. Paul, remind me of the next workshop date that they have in line for the master plan.
It's probably January, February.
Okay. I know you mentioned it. I forget exactly the date.
That'll be public facilities, infrastructure.
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of, I don't need we need to set up a committee, but if we wanted to each take some time and put together our thoughts and try and organize them, and maybe find some time on an upcoming agenda, if there is one, to just kind of look through a kind of collected version. If we are able, if people submit comments through Paul, then we can kind of maybe have some kind of, doesn't need to be very organized, but just kind of general themes of, this is an infrastructure point, this is an open space point, this is a housing point. And that might, does that kind of fall in line with kind of what you were looking for, Oren?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for us and for them as well.
Yeah, I think we can each take some time over the next 4 or 5 weeks and do that if we feel we have the opportunity.
I think that would be very helpful. And keep in mind, we will ask other boards to review this, such as Conservation Commission.
Yeah.
I think we would need to bring it to the Capital Improvements Committee that Julie's on. We want, it needs to be realistic, so those groups that are implementing this needs to tell us, how do we structure this or write something in a way that they can go forward and clearly understand what it means, and take whatever actions they need to take to make it happen.
Clearly understand it and clearly communicate it to others, most importantly.
Exactly. We did this in Austin, and people, the public did their part. They wrote down what it was they wanted, and then the colleagues in other departments would work on it and say, well, the way we would say this is this. That way we know what we're to achieve. It was exactly the same direction as what the public was saying, but they just put it in the terms that met their industry standards. It just puts more reality on it, because sometimes when plans aren't checked by other fields, you have gaps in it, and we just don't want that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. I mean, it's good everybody we put on our thinking hats for the first part of this meeting. The last part of the top of the agenda that we had today was future meeting dates. And we just have these scheduled through December 1st and 15th, correct, Paul?
Correct.
So we'd be looking to lock down some meeting dates through probably May or June, depending on how comfortable we feel. Since Joe is not here, I think maybe we try and, if it's possible, to let's maybe note these down and send them around and send them out via email, so that way Joe can take a look and flag any that don't work on his end. Because obviously we could roll snake eyes and set 3 meetings that Joe can't make. So go from there. So we have December with a December 15th meeting. I think if we're looking at January, I think that we should probably look to the first available Tuesday for a 3-week gap. So that would be potentially January 5th and 19th. Does anybody have anything specific on either of those 2 days? Nothing? Okay. Well, that's easy. And then February, 2 weeks would be February 2nd. And then we probably want to avoid the President's Day week. I'm not sure people will really be going anywhere on February vacation at this point, but people probably will still have plans of some variety potentially, and depending on how it conflicts with everybody else's normal schedules, I think I would suggest maybe the 2nd and the 23rd, unless anybody feels differently. Nothing? Wow. And then for March, we'd be the 9th and the 23rd.
Do we know when town meeting is, September town meeting is? Yet, Paul?
It'll be in May. I think around the 17th or so. But it'll be a May date.
Okay.
Tim, I'm sorry, the 9th and the 23rd?
That's what I had suggested, yeah.
Okay.
And we have an election in April, correct? Am I correct in that?
I think so, Tim, right? Isn't it normally in April?
I believe so. Do we have that date available?
I'm looking.
Possible that hasn't been posted that far ahead yet.
Let's see. I'm on the Secretary of State's. I don't see anything for April 2021 yet. So I'm on the Massachusetts elections calendar. I'm not seeing it.
Tim, you're asking the town election, right?
Correct. In April.
Yeah. It's probably not decided yet. We shouldn't worry about it at this point.
Okay. Well, let me see here. I think if I'm just gonna guess, I'll guess they would do that on the 6th, and then I would suggest maybe in April we would do the 13th and the 27th to again avoid the Patriots Day week. So April 13th and 27th. And Paul, maybe it does make sense to kind of pause there if we're not sure. I know I had said May or June, but if we're not sure about the election and then town meeting, because as we've seen before, having our meetings scheduled in conjunction with the potential for town meeting is helpful.
Yeah, and again, that April could change because that'll be the town meeting. If we have any zoning articles, you'll be hearing them in April.
Yeah, if we avoid Patriots Day week, there's only 3 available Tuesdays in April anyway. The 6th, the 13th, and then the 27th. And if one of those is the election, then we're down to 2.
Yeah.
So I don't have to choose at all. I just have to pick the ones that we can legally do. Well, we could legally do Patriots Day. So that would be, so again, I have January 5th and 19th, February 2nd and 23rd, March 9th and 23rd, and April 13th and 27th. Nobody has any plans for anything right now, because thank you, COVID.
I've been hearing on the news that Dr. Fauci says the country could start returning to normal by April 2021.
We can all hope.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that takes care of that. Other than that, we just have 3 open special permits for our public hearings that all the applicants have all asked for continuances. So we would look to, first one of those would be special permit 494 for 0 Rear East Eddy Street. The applicant is seeking continuance to the December 1st meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Julie with the motion, Orin with the second. Hearing nothing further. Move to vote. Orin?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Okay. The next one is 227 East Main Street. This is Condyne. They are seeking a continuance to the December 1st meeting as well.
Tim, do we officially open that?
No,
We
this
have not.
So does that need to be voted on then, or just moved since we didn't, I think, begin discussions? I don't know. I guess point of information, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, it has not been, the meeting has not been opened, so, but it was on the agenda. So I think that Steve, if
Okay.
you feel differently about this than me serving as the vice chair, I would think that we would just be able to take action and move it and continue.
Yeah, I think Julie's right. I don't necessarily think we have to vote on it, but I mean, I always err on the side of caution, so.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so I move to move it.
Oh, I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Julie, for the motion, Steve for the second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Orin?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. And the final one on the list is 176 South Washington Street. The applicant is John Carroll Advertising. This applicant is seeking to continue to the December 15th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Steve, for the second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Orin?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That concludes our agenda for this evening, unless anybody else has anything further they'd like to bring up to the board.
I'd love to motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Steve, for the motion and Orin for the second. Further discussion? Not waiting for any. Orin?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Thank you very much, everybody.